All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you. Hope you like that little countdown timer I provided you. I got to get the timing a little bit because the song, I guess the music, the background music ended just a touch before the countdown timer did. So I guess that means I have to start that timer a couple seconds earlier. I'll do that next time, hopefully, presumably. I want to thank one of my great listeners, friend of the program for years and years, Shade, for saying, hey, put a countdown timer. And it's only 60 seconds. I can make it longer, but you know, I don't like watching, and I've seen plenty of podcasts where there's like a 10-minute timer, and I get the reason for it. You want people to build, and you get the anticipation. And maybe if I had, 1,000 people who were watching me live at one moment, I'd consider that. But it's a little frustrating to just sit there and watch that thing count down. So I think the advantage of doing it is you start, people see, they get a notification if they have notifications, set, checked, ticked, or if you're watching on Facebook or what have you, you see it. So you don't miss, right? I mean, that's the point, is hopefully you don't miss because you get the notification that the program's about to start. And so that's kind of how I'm doing it. And we'll see how that works, but it's just one more little convenience I'm hoping to provide you and make Halitics your destination on YouTube, your destination podcast. I do hope you'll click like. I hope you'll click subscribe. That helps. Obviously, we want to build this audience. That's the whole point of it, really, to try to change minds and hearts and get people to embrace what I believe is the correct vision right now for a better world, a better society where in the end we all have enough and nobody has too much. And that's just not the world in which we live. It's a free for all, so that means hopefully you'll call in. I had a great I thought it was a great program. I love talking to Carlos. I was telling my wife about this. It's really nice for me to talk to somebody who pretty much shares my view on issues. And obviously, Carlos and I don't see eye to eye on everything. We have our disagreements. We have different backgrounds, different education. We've been educated different places, different schools, the whole thing. So we're not going to see eye to eye on everything. But we see very, very closely. Our ages are different. He's black, I'm white. I mean, all of those factor into our worldviews. And yet, I probably, in my life, I don't think there's anyone I've been closer to on more issues than Carlos. So it's really nice. I mean, he's 40 years young. I don't think he's that, but 35 years younger, somewhere in that range, 35 to 40 years. So there's a huge generation gap, which often can be the biggest factor. So all of those things, and yet, on issue after issue, we pretty much see eye to eye. For me, that's really, really nice because I don't see eye to eye with most people. You even read the comments on Facebook, on Halitics for this program. Most people take issue with a lot of what I say. And that's part of the reason I do this. Hopefully we can have a back and forth, a dialogue, and maybe come to some agreement. That's the goal. And not only just agreement, but then what's the right course of action to take so we can get to that better place, that place where hopefully we all have enough. And we don't experience a world where just a few people, a few billion, aggregate all the wealth for themselves. It's just so toxic. It's created such a toxic, literally toxic planet that is dying because of human action. All right, 240-242-5646. I hope you'll join me. 240-242-5646. No, we don't have, received wisdom here, and it's not about just embracing what is generally considered a progressive agenda. Not at all, especially on some social issues. Not all. I tend to hew to the center, and probably some would say to the right. But hey, that's the way it goes. I don't think that's my view. I don't think that's the way I see it when it comes to Israel and Gaza. I don't think anyone would say I'm to the right. I'm very, very far to the left, much further to the left than just about anyone in Congress, except maybe Rashida Tlaib, who I think sees the world in of the Arab Israeli world similarly to me. This is from Al Jazeera. Usually my first topic is reporting the death count. And I'm not going to do that today over the past 24 hours because I couldn't find it. I looked, and I don't know whether that means hopefully maybe there weren't a lot of people killed by Israel in the past 24 hours. It's certainly possible. There's not optimism, though. You can see this is from Al Jazeera. You see the date. It's today. There's a lot of sense of dread, of even worse foreboding than we've seen. There was optimism, some optimism, that Ismail Haniyeh, was assassinated by Israel in Tehran just a couple of days ago. He was the leader of the political arm, not the military arm of Hamas, but the political arm. And he had been negotiating, pushing hard for that ceasefire that we all want. I don't think clearly Israel doesn't want, but the ceasefire that so many in Israel do want. Bring the hostages back, stop the killing, come to some negotiating plan to ultimately bring about peace in the region. Something that clearly Netanyahu doesn't want, seems that the hardliners in Israel don't want, but that was there was hope, there was optimism. And when Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran by Israel, a lot of those hopes faded. And so here's what Al Jazeera, how they report it. It's so sad. It really is. And like I said, I don't have a 24-hour death count, but it's just a brutal, miserable existence if you are able to exist right now at all in Gaza as a direct result of what Israel's doing, the genocide. So even among the death, there still can be hope. People in Auschwitz, I don't know whether my understanding is there was hope. Hey, maybe the Russians are coming. We're listening. We're trying to figure out if there could be. Are we hearing gunfire? Is the Red Army approaching? So even then, if you weren't gassed, thought, well, maybe I can survive. And actually, Leon Uris describes that in the book Exodus, which is a paean to Israel. It's a paean to the Jewish state. But he talks about what life was like for the victims of the Holocaust before they were murdered, for those few survivors. It's very moving, actually. There was some optimism, some hope, even in the darkest places, until the light was snuffed out completely for them. So in Gaza, there was hope, right? There was a sense, hey, Haniyeh is our ally. He's talking. At least there are talks with Netanyahu. At least we understand that the American president, maybe he's building the bombs or he's sending the bombs to Bibi to kill us, but he's also trying to stop the killing. And when Haniyeh was murdered by the, I guess, Mossad or some Israeli assassination group, a lot of those hopes were dashed. So it's awful. I mean, there's just no other way. It's a terrible situation, and we're supporting it. And this is one of the things that brings me much, much misery. And for me, I mean, it's like, I'm not the victim. I'm not trying to claim I am, but I just feel terrible for the people who are. And I do hold, it's our country, responsible. All right, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. Please do subscribe. Yes, we are taking calls, as I just said, on any topic. And it doesn't even have to be one I'm bringing up today. I'll go through a few, and some controversial ones, including the Olympic. The latest, and it's not a trans controversy, but it is a sex-gender controversy. The word sex is often left out, right, of these discussions. It's always about gender, but the really important factor, as far as I'm concerned, is the sex. What is the sex of the person, the individual that is or is not appropriately competing against women? It's not the gender that matters. It's what their actual sex is. We'll get to that, but just wanted to give you some more miserable numbers. This is from yesterday's Anadolu Ajansi, the Turkish state news. 16,300 children killed. So we have a death count of about 40 grand by Israel since October 7. I guess if I can do the math right, that's what, 8 months? So it's about 9 months. A little less. Yeah, about 9 months. So about of the identified dead of about 40,000, 16,300 children. 40%. You're telling me that's a result of military maneuvers? There's no way the Allies during World War II killed 40% children. Just that's not what happened. You know, look, I decry a lot of the bombing by the Brits and the Americans during World War II, both of Germany and Japan. But even that was bad. It was really, really bad. And the A-bomb on the second one, you cannot defend. Into arguments about the first one, I think there's a very, very powerful case that was a war crime as well. The first one on Hiroshima, but the second clearly not be justified, defended. It was a terrible atrocity. But as bad as the American and Brit bombing was, many civilians were killed. We didn't see these kind of numbers. And I hate to say it, but there's, you know, it's a little more understandable. England had been subject to the Blitz. Germany had clearly, gleefully started the war. Japan did attack us at Pearl Harbor. Not saying what we did in response, the way the war was conducted was always, according to Hoyle, was always okay, but it's a measure of just how evil Israel's actions are, that its deliberate targeting of civilians in its war on Gaza is, I think, are clearly worse than much of what we did, much of what our allies did against civilians. Second World War. 35 children there starved to death due to Israel's blockade on Gaza. Will Kamala, I mean, for me, the question I keep asking, and I don't have a good answer, will Kamala change policy when it comes to Israel? And I would say this, it doesn't look good, right? It doesn't look likely. It doesn't look like we're probably going to see any real insistence, any demand that Israel rein in its murderous genocidal impulses under a President Harris, if we get one, and almost certainly we wouldn't under President Trump. Although Trump did say, right, didn't show any real compassion for the Palestinians, but he said, you got to stop this. We can't see all this. Just get it done. Take that for what it's worth. All right, before we get to the Olympics, I do want to get there. Another story, getting a lot of oxygen is this hostage swap, right, with Russia. So a number of Russian and, you know, a number of prisoners of war and others being held by Russia released, and likewise we released some of our prisoners. And this is from the New York Times. So think there were 16 freed by Russia. 3 were American, or at least Biden welcomes 3. And the New York Times praises him. This is vintage Joe Biden diplomacy. You know, and it's nice. I mean, I'm glad 3 people were freed. It seems like small beer, right? But okay, I mean, that's better. It's good for them. We're happy that they're free, for sure. No question about it. And the Times gives you a kind of a literary, almost literary description of what it was like for for the reporters covering the event. Put that all on screen for you. The enthusiastic greetings that played out over about half an hour in the dark of the steamy, by the way, absolutely steamy. I'm here in Maryland. It has been just a miserable summer. Unbridled joy, and seemed to vindicate the patient multilateral diplomacy that Biden proudly practices, but has so far proved unable to halt wars in Gaza and Ukraine. So I was like, really? Does he proudly practice patient multilateral diplomacy? You know, one of the most, I guess, diabolical, I don't know, diabolical is a little strong, but, you know, one of his most notorious actions when it comes to foreign policy was rallying Democrats to support the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney war on Iraq, on the people of Iraq, that was so devastating, so destabilizing, so harmful, so unjust. That wasn't patient multilateral diplomacy. That was just raw, naked force that destroyed a country. So I don't know how Biden is known or proudly practices that. And then they go on to say that type of diplomacy has proven unable to halt wars in Gaza and Ukraine. It hasn't been tried. What do you mean that he proudly, it hasn't stopped the wars? Where's there been an effort? Where's been the effort to stop the war in Ukraine? In fact, it was just the opposite. The U.S. used Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson, you know, was happy to do it. The former Tory, the former Prime Minister, the Tory Boris Johnson, went to Ukraine back in 2022 and told Zelensky in no uncertain terms, you're not going to sign a peace deal. There's not going to be negotiations with Russia. There's going to be war. That's not proud, patient, multilateral diplomacy. The U.S. has shown remarkable patience with Israel, but no diplomacy. No insistence that they just stop killing Gazans. So you got to read stuff in the New York Times. I mean, the facts are the facts. Hostages are released. I'm sure that's accurate. But the editorializing, the adjectival descriptions, come on. There's been no patient multilateral diplomacy, just war, killing, placating the weapons manufacturers. That's the Joe Biden I know. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. But all that said, yeah, it's nice that a few hostages got released. There's a lot more, and I just want to just put this because the New York Times, to its credit, absolutely wasn't, yeah, that was a pretty kind of a little bit of a puff for Biden. But the Times in the paper had a second article, which I thought was pretty important. Russia released 16 prisoners, hundreds of others left behind. Hundreds of prisoners, including Americans and Russian political activists, are hoping for a political agreement to secure their release. Of course they are. Of course, because they want to get released. Here's the problem. We're not in any position to have detailed, patient, multilateral negotiations with Russia because we're engaged in a proxy war with Russia. And that greatly limits our ability. Unless we're prepared to say to Russia, hey, we're going to stop. We want this to end. We're going to work together. We'll figure out something with the borders. We'll figure out something to have some kind of a, area between you, a buffer zone between you and Ukraine. We're not going to expand NATO east of Poland, period, end of the story. That's done. Then you can get those prisoners released. Then you'll have an ability to have some impact on Putin. Until you do that, nope, ain't going to work. The endless war, the proxy war with Russia has been another just absolute disaster for us. A disaster for Ukraine. It's been disaster for Russia, but not for Putin. Just like the war on Gaza has been horrible for the Israeli people, right? I mean, they're spending so much money, they've lost whatever was left of their soul. Of course, they're not the true victims. The true victims are the people they're killing. But they're under attack, they're under stress. There's Hezbollah launching rockets. Some of them get through. They're not secure. But it's been a boon for Netanyahu. So these wars that we engage in hurt the people. They're incredibly costly. They're terrible for the environment. Even though our allies, the everyday folks, they're not benefiting. In fact, they're losing because the people who are the families of the hostages, most of the hostages are probably killed or dying. They could have been, the releases could have been secured, but no more. I mean, to see Democrats all giddy and excited about year after year of war with Russia, being excited about $60-70 billion allocated for weaponry to just maintain stalemate, or worse, Russia's actually advancing. It's what a pathetic spectacle. All right, 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. I mentioned Carlos earlier. Great having him on. I do commend to your attention yesterday's program with Carlos. I think the title on the thumbnail is it okay to vote for her? And there's an image of Kamala. And, our conclusion was, yeah, it's okay, but don't expect anything much good to come out of it. It's okay because, yeah, you can make the argument probably, the better argument is Trump is worse, right? I don't know in 2016 that the better argument was that Trump is worse than Hillary. But the better argument was, I believe, is probably now, especially in light of January 6th, better argument is, and in light of his clear support for Israel, the better argument is probably she's not quite as bad. So yeah, go ahead, vote for her, I guess. If that's what you feel you have to do, I won't condemn it. This story Carlos brought to my attention. I was completely unfamiliar with it. He also sent me a link to, I think it was a CNBC coverage of it. I did not ultimately choose to use a CNBC story, rather going with Common Dreams, just because they kind of packaged it a little bit more in the way I wanted to discuss. But there's Reed Hastings from LinkedIn, billionaire. It's interesting. This guy made $1 billion from LinkedIn. I don't use LinkedIn much. I mean, I do have a LinkedIn account. I guess if I was looking for jobs, it is a good space to learn where there are openings. And I think, in fact, my brother-in-law, who's a recruiter, has said that. So I guess it's a valuable, useful website. Does that mean you should be worth $1 billion because you founded it? I'm going to say no. I don't think so. But he's got it, and he's spending it on Democrats. He's contributing, that is Reed Hastings, the guy at the top there, to elect Kamala Harris, and he wants her to fire Lina Khan, who's the FTC chair. Lina Khan has been she's been very skeptical, and she's used her power to try to rein in the billionaire class, the monopolists, Silicon Valley. They don't like it. They're not happy about that. They want to get rid of her. One of the few kind of populist policies that we've seen from Biden. One of the frustrating things that I face is when I point out the litany of horrors for which Joe Biden is responsible. Carlos pointed out, I think he's deported more people than Trump even did. We are the #1 producer of oil and gas, which is obscene at a time when we are committing ecocide as a direct result of burning fossil fuels. And yet he is a champion of the fossil fuel industry. One of the frustrating aspects of my work as a pundit is when folks say, well, you're not talking about all the good things he's done, like the antitrust, or he's supported unions, he was for carjacking. And you know what? Yeah, it's not a complete disaster, right? He's not bad on everything, but he's still taking us further and further in the wrong direction, making things worse and worse. It's not good enough. Just being not totally evil isn't good enough. And to describe Biden as an ally of labor is just false. He's not an ally of labor. He just hasn't been as strong an enemy of labor as Republicans in general have been. But, you know, I don't want to say, okay, because Reed Hastings is trying to buy Kamala's, buy Kamala, right? Own Kamala, get Kamala to fire Lina Khan. To me, that's not a very good argument not to vote for Kamala Harris. The question is, will she be bought? Will she let herself be bought? And you can see a lot of progressives are saying, no, this is a bad idea, or self-described progressives like Bernie Sanders. You know, I think this was a very poor strategy by Hastings to make it clear, yeah, I want to get rid of her, because now if Harris becomes president, I think she will become president, by the way. There's a poll that just came out, Daily Kos Civitas, that has her up by 4 nationally. I think Trump is flailing. So I do think she's going to win. Maybe she won't. I mean, we don't know, but I think she'll win. She's put in a box, right? Either she gives, you know, if she does fire Khan, she looks like Harris does, President Harris would look like she's just, you know, giving in to the billionaire. She's allowing herself to be bought. So in a way, it's poor strategy, but here's where maybe it's not poor strategy. Hastings may say, you know what, give me this, I know that. Yes, but she'll give Sub Rosa. She'll give Silicon Valley maybe those, was it H-1B visas? I always get the name wrong. Is it H-1B? That's where they get to bring in a lot of tech workers. H-1B. Yes, H-1B. So that maybe Hastings is like, yeah, I don't like Khan, but what I really, really want is to get a whole bunch of Indian and Sri Lankan workers that I can bring into this country, fly them in from Chennai, Mumbai. I think is it Colombo that's the president? Maybe that's the capital of Sri Lanka. I think it's Colombo, I'm not sure. Fly them in. They never become citizens. They're here only as long as I want them. I can pay them it is Colombo, pay them crappy wages, you know, much more than they would be making in India or Sri Lanka, but nothing like what I would have to pay American workers. So I'll get the HB1 or H1B, what is it, H1B visas. So in a way, it's like I'm going to ask for this and I'm going to get that. That's something you have to be very careful, because I don't believe Reed Hastings is just going to give money to Kamala Harris, no strings attached. He is expecting something in return, and he's going to get it. Breaking Point's discussed this. This is Sagar and Crystal, and they had on a really good guest, Matt Stoller. He's a journalist. So I'm going to play part of it because I feel like this really kind of helped me understand maybe a little bit more about Kamala. It wasn't like any eye-openers here, but I want to just put this out there because, I think it helps us understand what's going on. So here's the Breaking Points discussion with Matt Stoller about the issue of the contributions by LinkedIn founder Reed Hastings and his insistence, his demand, his request, however you want to characterize it, that the FTC chair, Lina Khan, who has been a proponent of using antitrust law to break up big tech. Let's hear the discussion.
Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's part of it, but I also think, I did a bunch of interviews right before Biden took office, just talking to his crowd, and Biden always saw himself as kind of a foreign policy guy, and he was the senator from Delaware, and he's like, look, I have to represent the credit card companies because those are my constituents, but that's the job. But he always had this kind of resentment towards elites, in particular, like Ivy League elites. He hated the Silicon Valley guys. He always thought the Wall Street guys looked down on him. His people were more like the cable guys, right? And the people in the industrial parts of the economy that like make things. And there was a resentment there. Now, you wouldn't necessarily have seen it a lot.
All right, so I want to stop it there for a sec because it's really interesting. The question from Crystal Ball was, hey, Biden was always a corporate guy. Biden was a credit card guy. He was from Delaware. He always did whatever the credit card companies wanted, making it harder for people to declare bankruptcy, privatizing a lot of the student loan operations, raising the cap on interest rates that students would have to pay for those loans. So this was a guy who was never, on the side of consumers. He was never really on the side of working people, regardless of his reputation. And yet we did see some movement to the left with, the choice of Lina Khan, with the choice, with some of his policies when it came to labor. And Stoller is saying, yeah, but really there was at bottom some populism in Joe Biden's heart. He is from a working class background in Scranton. It is true. That is true. And yeah, maybe he did what the credit card companies wanted because they were bribing him, but he wasn't always happy about it and certainly wasn't a fan of Wall Street, who he correctly perceived as looking down on him. So that's why we might have gotten a little bit of populism on the fringes in the Biden administration. Crystal Ball saying, well, we see that with Kamala, who also nobody thinks of as a progressive or a populist, but maybe she'll, like Biden, surprise us to a degree. And here's what Stoller has to say.
In his track record, although Stephen Breyer, when he was overseeing him, he was the head of the judiciary, and Stephen Breyer was coming up to the Supreme Court, Biden did call him an elitist. So culturally, Biden was kind of like set. He's also old and understood the world before neoliberalism. And so Biden was, in some sense, he had a mild streak of populism there. And then I think he saw what Trump had done. And he said, look, the Democrats have to move in a different direction.
Right. So what that means, with regard to tariffs, right? Trump did impose some tariffs that did lead to some better outcomes in the Midwest, especially for working people. And they were popular, and they should be popular. And tariffs are a good policy. We should have tariffs to protect our working class. And our homegrown industries and our domestically centered businesses. So Biden said, hey, I can't reverse all of this, and rightly so. And Stoller is explaining that's why we might have seen some populism from Biden. Will we see that from Kamala?
Kamala Harris is just not like that. Her while Biden's cultural people were kind of like this resentful, they had a sort of chip on their shoulder types. I think Kamala Harris is much more comfortable with the whole Obama world, very smooth, very tech friendly, very much like very corporate. That does not say she might look at the same situation and say, I agree with Biden. We need to move in a more populist direction. She might say that.
I'm going to stop it there for a sec. I think that's a really, really accurate point, right? I mean, this is what I've been thinking as well. Look at how Kamala Harris came up from California with the support of Silicon Valley, with the support of the Democratic Party establishment that was never connected to really working class Californians, was never part of like the pro-union, pro-industrial movement. And even her actions, I mean, yes, she was pro, I guess, when she refused to depopulate the prisons, you could say that was a sop to the prison guard union, right? Because they were very much opposed, right? The California prison guards were very much opposed to, decrowding the prisons, reducing overpopulation, because that would mean some of their jobs might be lost. So that you could say she was being somewhat pro-labor. And I think she was being petitioned by the prison guards union. They were saying, no, we need to keep all these people in jail so we'll have jobs. So that's, I guess, the pro-labor side of that policy. But the anti-labor side is she also viewed the captive population as a source of super cheap labor to fight fires. And that's terrible for the working people of the state who have to compete with, people in prisons who are what, $2 an hour if they're getting paid. I don't know what they were getting paid, but it was nothing. It was a pittance. So Kamala's not been part of the working class. She's not been associated with the working class. I think her relatives are a lot in tech. And Solar is saying, we don't see the same background from her, so we might well see her accede to what Reed Hastings and other tech bros are demanding. Get rid of Lena Khan. No more of this nonsense about populism. No more of the using antitrust policy to break up our mergers and acquisitions, prevent them.
That she's also just a lot less substantive than he is. She does not have.
So that's another really important fact. So he says she's a lot less substantive. And what he means by that is she doesn't care about policy. And I think we've seen that, right? I mean, we've seen her, she goes from being a tough on crime prosecutor, somebody who ran against a Republican saying he didn't lock up enough people, somebody who defied federal court order demanding that the overcrowding the prisons in California be ended. She went from that to, at least according to Sean Hannity in 2020, being the most liberal U.S. senator. Who knows if that's true? Who knows what that even means? But, she stood up and she said she was for Medicare for all. Then she later on pulled it. She's not a policy person. That's just not who she is. Unlike, and we'll all continue to play
particularly, unlike Obama, unlike Biden, she just doesn't seem to care about policy for good or bad. So it's a different character. And I maybe she just is like, whatever. I don't want to pick fights with those with the populists. I don't know exactly what she does, what she's going to do, but everybody's surrounding her and her whole kind of cultural milieu, her friends are going to push her in a really bad direction. On the other hand, she's not an ideologue. Like Obama was a very strong ideologue.
Yes, right.
Like we have to help the banks.
Right, so
we have to help Silicon.
I'll end it there, but that's interesting. He's saying her advisors are problematic, are not progressive. I did not know that personally. It's very, very worrisome. Very, very troubling. What he also says is, though, look, she's not a policy person. She doesn't really have strong beliefs, strong views. She's a political creature. She's somewhat of an empty suit. Unlike Obama, who really, according to Stoller, and I don't know if this is true, really had affinity. You know, he was economically a neolib, like Hillary, like Clinton, like the Clintons. He was, according to Stoller, a neolib, and maybe we can see that in the way he bailed out the big banks, not the underwater homeowners. And he's saying, you know, that was Obama did have those convictions. They were really bad convictions. At least Harris doesn't have those convictions. Not that she has any at all. So I guess it's wait and see. But frankly, none of that gives me hope or optimism that Kamala Harris will govern if she's elected. And I say the polls say that she'll be elected. None of that gives me a lot of optimism. She's going to fight for you if she is elected. All right, I want to get to this Olympics controversy. I saw a lot about this online. This Algerian fighter, Imani Khalif, and she won. This is from, I was really trying to find the right source because there's so much tendentiousness in the reportage of this story. From like liberal media, Fox News reporting it one way, New York Times very differently. So this is just Burnham and Highbridge Weekly News. It's a newspaper in England. I felt like they gave you facts that I feel like were pretty fair. So Imani Khalif is a woman boxer from Algeria, and in that picture, she's in red, and the Italian woman she defeated by, I guess they would call it TKO. I don't really know how they do it, or she withdrew, whatever, is in blue, Angela Carini. I want to say first and foremost, I think this is barbaric. I don't think there should be boxing in the Olympics. I'd like to see boxing banned. I think for men and women. I think it's worse if it's women. My understanding is women suffer even more. Not that men don't, but in general, women, even though they punch less hard, when they're in a ring getting punched, when one woman gets punched by a woman, it's even more likely to cause more permanent injuries than when a man is getting punched if they're, professional. Maybe I'm wrong. I might be wrong, but to me, this is absolute barbarism. My only pause, the only reason I pause when I say it should be banned is because, I don't want to drive this stuff underground, and it probably would go underground. I mean, I think cockfighting is illegal in this country. We still have cockfighting. The best way to get rid of these kinds of blood sports, and this is a blood sport, the best way to get rid of them, in my view, football's a blood sport. I can't watch that crap anymore either. The best way to get rid of them, in my view, is you have my ultimate solution for so much: reduce wealth and income inequality greatly. Not eliminate them. I'm not a leveler, but guarantee everyone has enough and no one has too much. And then the economic spur, the push. I mean, so many people go into these blood sports because what else? They have very few other options. Abe Attell, he was a great boxer. 125 years ago, he started his career in San Francisco, became world champion. And his mom said, "Hey, Abe, I don't want you." They were very poor family, slums of San Francisco. And his mom said, "I don't want you fighting, Abe," because he was always fighting. And one day he came home, 13 years old, he gave her like $10, said, "I just won this." And she says, "Okay, keep fighting," right? Because she might have loved her son. She didn't want to see him get the crap kicked out of him. But A, he was winning, and B, they needed the money. But if you don't need the money because you already have health care, you already know your kid's going to get a good education, will be able to go, if they're smart and they do well, they'll get to go to Cal, right? Then the pressure, the economic push to get punched and punch again, punch other people is not there. Now, some people want to hit each other, and maybe if they want to and they don't need to, it is less problematic for me. So Angela Carini says she never felt a punch like the one she took from Imane on the right. And this became a big deal because there have been questions about Imane Khelif's sex. And I want to be real clear. I am not questioning, and I think we all have to accept this. And I understand some did. For example, I think, was it J.K. Rowling? I may mention J.K. Rowling again. J.K. Rowling questioned Khelif's gender. And I don't want to cast aspersions, but Rowling may have referred to Khelif as a man. And Khelif is not. Khelif is her gender is female, right? She was raised female. She was at birth assigned the sex of female. At least that's my complete understanding. She is not trans. She did not transition from being a male or being perceived as a male or being assigned being a male. She did not transition because everyone thought from when Imane was born that she was a girl. But the fact is, biologically, Imane Khelif, as far, and this is not absolutely certain, but as far as we know, based on reportage, which may or may not be completely accurate, Imane Khelif was born XY chromosome, and that is ultimately conceived. I want to say born, conceived. Imane Khelif apparently received a, what is it? I always get this confused. X is female, Y is male. You always get an X from your mother, but you get either an X or a Y from your father and your bio father, right? Because we say, oh, my father's the person who raised me, not the person who's sperm, not the sperm donor. Okay, your bio father contributes either an X or a Y chromosome. If it's a Y chromosome, then almost invariably the child will grow up to be a male. XY, male. But if the father, so the male has an X and a Y and can give either one to their offspring. If the father gives an X, then it's it's a female, 2 X's. In this case, though, and every now and then, maybe 1 out of 100 births, it's not clear the number, there's intersex. In other words, the chromosomes may say one thing, but the body says something else. The chromosomes are what you are biologically, not what you feel like you are, not what you look like, but what you are. And from what I understand, and again, there's some question, because this came from the International Boxing Association where Imane Khelif fought, that tests there that showed heightened levels of testosterone, which, by the way, is what builds big, strong muscles, and what men have far more of in general. I don't have a lot of time. I'm not muscular, but on balance, men are more muscular because we have more testosterone. So IBA runs these testosterone tests on boxers, men and women, because if you get shots, you get hormone injections, you are going to be bigger, stronger, you'll be able to hurt people more. It's not fair. We don't want to have an arms race between athletes where they're all pumping themselves up with HGH and the like. There are many reasons that's a really bad thing. So the IBA, International Boxing Association President Umar Kremlev, had said that Khelif was proven, and it's in quotes, this is from the Sporting News, to have XY chromosomes. So biologically, that would mean a male. But again, my understanding is Khelif has a vagina. When she was born, the doctor said, okay, that's a girl. And by the way, this is why the whole idea of what your gender is assigned at birth is a load of crap. It's not what your gender is assigned at birth that matters. It matters a lot. But when it comes to sports, when it comes to athletics, when it comes to your build, what really matters is what you're conceived as. And virtually invariably, what you're conceived as is what you're, quote, assigned, unquote, at birth. Because virtually everyone who has XY chromosomes has a vagina. And virtually, sorry, got that wrong. Virtually everyone who has XY chromosomes has a penis. And virtually everyone who has XX chromosomes has a vagina. That's how doctors determine your sex. But there's always a few, right, on the margin cases. So, Imani Khelif is apparently that case. And that makes her biologically, and let me just put this picture up, that makes her biologically intersex, not female. And you can see, I don't, a lot of activists will say, oh, you can't go by looks and this and that. No, you can see that's Imani Khelif. She has attributes, physiological attributes that make her appear far more masculine, right? You don't see any breasts. There's virtually no waist. The arm looks pretty strong to me. It's not super defined muscle, but it's strong. The face is harder, right? The bones are more prominent. The jawline is square. The brow, it all looks more like a man. She looks more masculine. And this matters because, therefore, we can reasonably conclude, not always, not in every case, but reasonably conclude that she is bigger, stronger, more able to inflict harm on another human being physically with her fists than a woman could. And then I say, well, then I don't think she should be, not that there should be boxing in the first place. And you can even see by comparing the pictures. And a lot of trans activists hate what I'm saying. And they think it's not right, and I'm ignorant, and I'm this, and I'm that. And I say to you, don't gaslight us. We can all see. You shouldn't be discriminated against if you're trans in terms, and by the way, Imani Khelif is not trans. She didn't transition. She was born a girl, thought to be a girl, raised a woman, and that's who she is. No argument. But if you look at her on the right in red compared to the woman to to Imani's right, but our left, there's differences. The one on the left has breasts. She's softer looking. There's no doubt about it. She's at risk of greater physical harm. It's just the way it is. And I don't care what you say. You don't gaslight me and tell me, oh no, it's not fair. Serena Williams, she could do this and that. She could kick your ass on a tennis court. Of course she could. But she couldn't kick the 300 or 400th rated male tennis player. She's admitted that. There are physiological differences between biological men and biological women. It's just the way it is. Period. End of story. I don't know why this is such, but and I will say this: when progressives start arguing differently, people look at you like you're crazy. You've lost the thread. You really have. No, you shouldn't be discriminated against. Yes, you should have every opportunity to make a good living. You should be guaranteed enough. And I think you should be allowed to compete, but just not compete against, of course you should be allowed to compete against other people who are but there needs to be, all that said, and we have to work on this. But when it comes to high school, college, and high-level women's sports, there needs to be biological women-only spaces. Even the argument, I find it offensive. I really do. Well, if you get hormone therapy, if you're, if you have estrogen shots, if you have this, if you have that, we shouldn't be relying on chemistry and medicine ultimately to level the playing field. Who is that great horse? Seabiscuit was a great, one of the greatest racehorses of all time. And I read that book, Seabiscuit, by Laura Ingraham. No, Laura Ingram's friend, Laura Hillenbrand. Laura Ingraham and Laura Hillenbrand are actually friends. But Laura Hillenbrand, I believe, is Laura Reed. Maybe it's Laura, but I don't know. Anyway, Hillenbrand, very good book about this horse. And back in the 30s, when Seabiscuit, late 30s, was dominating racetracks, they had handicaps. They have handicapping now, but the handicapping is more about the odds, right? Or they'll add a second. But back in the 30s, they'll add a few seconds. The horse has to win by certain lengths, I believe. But back in the 30s, the way they would handicap horses is they put some weights in their saddles. So to try to level the playing field, you would put like a 20-pound weight of sand, 20-pound bag of sand in Seabiscuit's saddle. And he would have to carry all this extra weight. And yet he still won, right? Even with all that, even with that handicap. But in a way but clearly it wasn't fair, because if Seabiscuit lost by a nose to a horse that didn't have 20 pounds extra carrying, clearly Seabiscuit was the better horse. I don't want to have to rely on sciencing. Okay, well, we've taken away all the advantage that this biological male, this XY chromosome individual has. So now it's safe for them to get in a boxing ring. Now the woman has a chance to win the sprint. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's the way we should be looking at sports. We should be looking at sports as a competition between individuals or teams where the participants are already relatively equal. Obviously, some of us have advantages, but we recognize that in the end, there is a significant innate advantage that men have over women when it comes to most, not every sport, but most sports. And nothing that can be changed, yes, by various, chemical means, by surgery and the like. I don't want to have to rely on that. I don't think that's appropriate. There are better ways to deal with that. There are better ways to say, okay, you get to compete, but you don't compete against somebody who is physiologically different than you are. So I want to just real clear, I don't know if I showed this, but I want to just be real clear about this whole definition because, well, let me show you. This is what I saw on Facebook, and I never want to, embarrass people, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not identifying anyone, but I just want to get there are a few thoughts in this. Her boxing record is 9 wins, 5 losses. We'll address that. 5 other women have beaten her. She is a cis woman, assigned female at birth. Y'all are just being transphobic. Okay. So my response is, well, first of all, she's not trans. I've been very clear. She's not trans. She did not transition. So people there might be some transphobia. I'm not saying there isn't, but she's not trans. So that's first of all. I don't know how it's misogyny. I don't see any misogyny in the bottom comment. How is it misogyny? I think a lot of people are motivated by real concern about a woman or girl's well-being when they're competing in a violent sports against someone who has a biological significant advantage. I've never felt a punch like this, said Angela Carini. I think a lot of people are motivated by they don't want women to have to get punched by individuals who have the strength of a male. So that's that. I wanted to make that point. Also, with regard, now you look at the picture again, that's sort of a softer picture of Amani, but still, you can see there are definitely male, masculine characteristics to her face. No question. Don't gaslight me and pretend that's not the case. It is absolutely the case. And finally, I did want to get into the issue of the record, because we saw that a lot. 9-5, 9-5, 9-5. No. This is the best I could come up with. I looked and looked and looked. So there's a picture of Amani, and again, looks masculine. Look, this is not a criticism. This is not a slur. This is not a slander. It's just the fact. Don't pretend that Amani Khalif has more feminine attributes. She doesn't. And that is a strong signifier that she has a big advantage when she gets into a boxing ring with another woman. And the record everyone's touting for Amani Khalif is 9-5. But in fact, the record is 42-6. No, 42-9. I'm sorry, 42-9. That's significantly better. 4 later disqualified. 6 wins by knockout. So 44 of those disqualified were, I guess, some had to do with either some type of testosterone level or something of that nature. So 46-9. And you could say, well, is that even so great? 46-9, there's 9 losses. There's all sort of, I don't know. I can't get into that. I don't know. Most of those losses, I think, was when she was just coming up. She was up against older, more experienced fighters. Maybe her advantage isn't as great. There could be a million reasons. But in the end, do we want to rely on the fact that to date, trans, and in this case, an intersex athlete, as far as we know, maybe IBA is lying, she's not intersex, maybe she's XX. If she's XX, she's XX, period, end of story. Unless there's some issue there with taking, hormone treatments or something of that sort that make her more masculine. Maybe that's why she doesn't have breasts. I don't know. But as long as there's, in the end, do we want to rely on the fact that to date, trans and intersex athletes haven't completely dominated the competition, to say, well, they should be competing against girls and women because so far they haven't yet fully dominated? Because what happens when they start to? If they start to? I come back to the simple solution. There should be bio girl and bio women only spaces. And I don't know why this is so controversial. I truly don't understand that. I don't get it. All right, it is after 1, so we've been going over an hour. I have a few more stories, but I'm going to save them. I said I had a story about J.K. Rowling. I'll save it. I don't know if I'll ever get to it. I've been saving that for weeks and weeks and weeks. Sorry you didn't call. I would have loved to talk to someone about these topics. I know they're somewhat controversial. Some people don't like them or get uncomfortable. I think we have to talk about this stuff. I think the movement that I champion to forcibly address wealth and income inequality and guarantee everyone has enough, address poverty, I think that movement is hamstrung when we get bogged down in issues like whether somebody who is intersex, somebody who is biologically a male, XY chromosome. We get into it and what's fair. I think that we lose the thread because so many people, and I think rightly so, understandably so, say, hey, I don't want my daughter. I don't want my wife. I don't want my girlfriend. I personally don't want to be competing against somebody who's bigger, stronger, has more muscle mass than I do because they were born or they were conceived XY. I don't want to have to face that. I don't want to see that. And that seems so reasonable to me and ultimately correct. I think we lose something when we pitch our battles on a hill like that. All right, have a great weekend. I'll be back on